I did. Wait. Did I give you too many?
And then continued it
I didn't know that.
to March 8th.
March 8th.
I'll wait another minute or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're having a.
Tell me when it's good.
I wonder what you had for the meeting.
We're gonna indicate in the work session. It's a little bit different than a formal decision in a meeting, but it ought to be tons of tonight, what we wanna do or what we don't wanna do. And that's what their briefing is on, the alternatives of what they wrote down. I was told that well, I know Jim Bean told me he went to houses, and then the town, I believe, were first to
It'll be interesting to see where both of
went
us.
up to that.
What road would they have? And I've got some great ideas to go a step further. Okay. Let's make it lively. Yeah. Because it won't be to start with. Yeah, because it's, good enough. Yeah. Scott?
I'd like to call to order this work session of the Town Superior Board of Trustees. And I think we have a presentation.
We have two items on your workshop agenda tonight. The first is a continued discussion on proposed improvements on what has been referred to as Community Park East, the area just east of Rock Creek Parkway and physically adjacent to Community Park. Both Parks and Rec staff as well as representatives of ProStack are in attendance tonight to give you a third iteration of the proposed improvements over there. I would give you a brief summary that you've seen these plans back in July and again in October. It was our schedule to look at them at this meeting as well during the budget review. The plans that you're about to see are consistent with what you've seen in the past in terms of the three new park amenities that have been previously discussed, the MX bike, dog park, and disc golf. And the budget is consistent with what you've included in your long-term financial plan, which included approximately $363,000 over 2 years, with about $220 to come from the town's receipts, lottery tax receipts, Conservation Trust Fund, and is contingent upon a $150,000 GOCO grant. So, without further ado, Juanita, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Sorry about the delay. Having a few technical difficulties. So instead of my brief PowerPoint presentation, what I'll do is I'll wing it from scratch, and then we'll go on to have John Lanterman of Studio Urbanista talk about the designs. First of all, the presentation tonight, the purpose of the presentation tonight, wanted to go over history, first of all, not just for me, but for individuals who might be watching this on TV and those in the room. Wanted to also provide a brief review of the process, not the current process, but the big picture process, the thing that we've gone through for the last 4 or 5 years. Also wanted to address some of the previous concerns that the board and others may have had after our October 28th work session. And then finally we'll present those 90% complete design drawings the preferred alternative for ProStack and staff. First of all, the history. Just wanted to briefly talk about the history. In 2005, the history of the dog park began with master plan process. Master plan process, as you all might remember, included surveys, community meetings, that kind of thing. Within the statistically valid survey, there was a question regarding needs that are being met. And as far as the dog parks were concerned, 82% of the respondents said that their needs weren't being met for a dog park. 22% listed dog park in their top 4 facilities. Now 21%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but in the scope of all the different things that they could have picked, 21% was very high. In 2007, a petition was presented to the board, and that petition had 449 Superior residents that favored the construction of a dog park. In 2008, ProStack ranked the dog park as the second highest new amenity needed for the town. In 2009, ProStack proposed dog park to be included in the CTF budget. The history of the bike park, that began all the way back in 2005 in the same process, but in community meetings. Community meetings said, hey, there's some kids out there that are using the creek north of what is now Williams Field as a bike park. That has since expanded. That is a difficult place because the area is eroding. There's evidence of erosion and damage to the native areas back there. And it's a difficult place to actually monitor. Again, in 2008, bike enthusiasts, you'll remember they went to ProStack, and so bike enthusiasts came to the board and actually, had this grandiose presentation of what they thought a bike park could be, and it was awesome to see. But anyway, in 2008, ProStack ranked the bike park as the highest new amenity needed for the town. In 2009, ProStack also proposed the bike park to be included in the CTF budget. The history of the disc golf is very similar. Way back in 2006, I don't know how many of you might remember this, but an Eagle Scout candidate, I think his name was John Renbarger, came to not only ProStack, I think he might come to the board as well, with this idea of a disc golf course. It was interesting to see that, looking back at some of the materials that he put together, he used some of the same locations that were considered for these amenities today. And as you know, there are very few areas to consider within town due to the fact that we don't own a lot of land and we're landlocked. But anyway, as far as the disc golf went, we had advocates attend various ProStack meetings in 2008. Advocates presented a petition to the board in 2008 as well, and ProStack ranked the disc golf course as the third highest amenity needed. They also proposed the bike park to be included in the CTF budget. Or the disc golf. I'm sorry about that. Nationally and locally, there are a lot of things going on. Dog parks, disc golf courses, and bike parks are among the fastest growing in the United States. In 2006, Trust for Public Lands put out a paper that indicated that there were over 2,000 dog parks that were being constructed in the United States. Also, there are over 3,000 disc golf courses that exist. The sport is growing from 12% to 15% a year, and locally, the city of Boulder is building Belmont Park, which happens to have disc golf, dog park, and a bike park. They also partially financed it through Great Rapids, Colorado. So as far as the process review, in 2008, ProStack analyzed and developed a formal prioritization process to determine the most needed new park amenities. In 2009, there was a policy decision to use CTF funds only for any new park amenities. In 2009, the board asked ProStack for their priorities, and ProStack delivered a 5-year CTF plan. In 2009, the board approved the CTF plan to include concept designs for the disc golf, dog park, and the bike park. Sorry about that. Process continued in April of 2009. We had consultants meet with staff and ProStack to talk about the 3 different amenities. In June, the consultants met with ProStack and OSAC and presented the concepts at one location. Discussion started about the potential Great Outdoors Colorado funding. 2009 of July, the concepts were presented to the board. In September of 2009, we also had a presentation for the entire community that included special letters that were sent out to the area residents surrounding the 3 parks area, Saddlebrook, Horizons, and the area by Reliant Court. In October, a work session was held in which the board indicated interest for a scaled-down version of the dog park and asked for ProStack to consider the relocation of the dog park. As far as addressing previous concerns, you'll see in a few minutes when the consulting team comes up how those concerns were dealt with within the design. Currently, the design is 90% complete. There is a scaled-down version of the dog park, and we addressed the considerations that were made regarding the relocation of the dog park. You'll see that the dog run completely eliminated. There'll be a smaller footprint along the creek. What used to be a couple thousand feet along the creek bed, now you'll see a couple hundred feet along the creek bed. The access point to the dog park was moved to the west side. This eliminates any need for anyone or any dog to have to come to the west side of the creek or to the north side of the creek. So that is eliminated. Water quality solutions were developed. Water quality solutions in the dog park, a self-contained solution that will actually pump any remaining water into the wastewater treatment plant right next door. The bike park has a water quality solution that was introduced. The bike park will now have a small catch pan that will catch any sediment before it goes anywhere and will eliminate anything going into the creek. A 50-foot buffer on either side of the creek was introduced to help alleviate any concerns about any other drainage issues within the creek. You'll also note that ERO Resources Corporation did an environmental assessment, and they said that the new design actually will enhance that particular area and that there is no threat to wildlife or habitat. And an optional dog park location within the 36-acre site will also be examined. Also addressing previous concerns, wanted to just briefly touch on the site evaluation process. Site evaluation process, ProStack re-examined through a formal process 8 different sites for the location not only of the dog park, the disc golf, and the bike park, but specifically for the dog park to make sure that they didn't miss anything. They looked at topography. Topography is important because if there are grading issues, that would have to be addressed in a budget. We are trying to make sure that we keep the costs down. If there were proximity to utilities, they looked at that. Utilities being water of importance to this project, water to irrigate and water to drink. So just the mere location of that water could add to the cost of the project. The proximity to homes, it's very important to look at the proximity that an amenity would be to homes so as not to create a difficult situation for homeowners. Visibility could be a pro or a con in this situation. Visibility being great for a bike park along an expanse of a street, but not so great with an amenity such as a dog park. It may bring down what a lot of people say is the appeal of this town as far as green space and what we really say is the wow of the community. Availability of parking is another item that they looked at very closely. And of course, pedestrian access. How accessible is it for the community to get to this park? I did use an example for the community park piece, and I'm going to show it on our PowerPoint presentation, but we do not have that tonight. But what I wanted to express was I gave an example of Community Park South Dog Park and evaluated that. And it had a couple of pros for the Community Park South Dog Park piece. And if you remember, this is a location that is along Colton Road next to the community ditch on the west side of the large parking lot in Community Park. So the pros, you had existing parking, which was great. It was centrally located, which was great. It was near the retail area, which was great. The cons were that it was very close to the street, a very busy street. That was difficult because when you look at dogs in an active area with a lot of noise, if there was a potential for a dog to get off leash, they could potentially run into a busy street. Also, maintaining attractive greenways and streetscapes and landscape parks are very highly valued for the community. As a matter of fact, I got that from one of the survey questions just recently. And citing a dog park along a substantial stretch of Colton would reduce that curb appeal. And the amenity is already busy, which is another point. Proximity to homes was another point ProSAC looked at. It was less than 100 yards to the summit. The grading slopes down to Freco Ditch, which again is grading issues. You would have to bring in fill to flatten it or deal with erosion. The erosion may create some problems with Freco Ditch Company with some of the sediment going into potentially their ditch. Again, looking at the Freco Ditch concerns that the county's having right now, and just getting a bridge over one of their trails, it could be potentially a very difficult place to try and put an amenity. In order to get into that park, you would have to actually cross over the maintenance road to Freco Ditch. So all of these different items were looked at, not only for this site, but for 8 different other sites. But at this point, what I really wanted to do is have John Lanterman come up here and talk about some of these items that have been addressed through this 90% complete drawing.
Thank you very much. Sorry for my tardiness. Welcome.
Mayor, trustees, I'm John Lanterman with Studio Urbanista down in Denver. Also tonight, the other 2 main designers that worked on the park, Sandy Gibson and Nick LaFranc, are also in attendance from Studio Urbanista. I think Juanita did a really good job of bringing us up to speed and all the variables that were looked at in the past. And what I'm really going to focus on is spend a few minutes just going over how we've taken these ideas now that we've honed it down to these 3 elements and the site that we have, and how we've given form to that, and how we've located that and organized this entire site to best take advantage of the natural site, and also how to best integrate the 3 different uses. So with this site, the 3 user groups are, we have the dog park, we have the dog users, we have the disc golf, and we also have the bike skills people. And if you think about that, how well do bikes, dogs, and disc golf get along? And inherently, they can get along great. But there's some potential for conflict with that as well. So what we've done, we stepped back and considered those 3 user groups and those 3 different uses, but then we also really had to bring in and think about this site. And what we have honed in on, and it's reflected here, is the natural quality of that, and also with Rock Creek running through the middle of it. That's a valuable resource that we really need to play up, and we also need to act as stewards to that. And so what we've done just initially is say, okay, we're going to have a minimum 50-foot setback from the center line of the creek on both sides.
let's have a 100-foot wide buffer area that we're only going to go through just and touch it as lightly as possible and to penetrate through that as few times as possible. So with those kind of overriding criteria, I'm going to go into a little more detail and talk about what we've come up with. So as you know, to orient you, here's Rock Creek Parkway down here. Here's the creek going through the center of the site, and we have Flatirons Crossing over on this side with apartments here and residential units up above, even some single family there. So given that, there also, when we're thinking about access, we're going to come along Honey Creek Lane. Oh, and also another important landmark here is wastewater treatment facility that's located right here. And the access road to that is along this kind of northern portion of the site off Rock Creek Parkway. And given that, what we're saying is we're going to have some users come in, they're going to be driving in, whether they're bringing their dogs or depending on the age of the bike user, they might be driving in as well. And then the disc golf users could also most likely be driving in, and I'll be talking about that a little more in a minute. And we've acknowledged also that there is a great deal of potential for bike riders to come from the main trail system and access it. So in thinking about those things, we've located the parking, we've tucked it in so it's not really visible from surrounding areas. And we're providing about 40 parking spaces in here. And we have 2 access points, very easy access in and out, let any cars that are coming in move through. We've also combined that. There's currently, it's kind of a low-key entry into this landscape drop-off yard. So what we've done to simplify circulation and reduce potential turning movement conflicts, we've combined that access on the north, and then there's the southern access. So now what we've done, how can we organize this? How can we intuitively let people go to where they want to go and minimize conflict? With that, we created a very simple circular circulation system that would be out of crusher fines. It's kind of like a fine gravel trail that compacts pretty well. So with the dog park over on the east side of that, it would be very easy for the dog users to get out, walk around, access the park on this side, enter into the dog park. It's about 1.25 acres. It's enclosed. We've also, in terms of budget constraints, we're using an existing fence along the north edge. And then we're doing a 3-rail fence that'll have metal mesh around the perimeter. And from an earlier iteration, we have simplified circulation, moved the main entry over to the west side of that to keep the dogs. Let's get right to the dog park. Let's not tempt them too much with the creek. So we've done that as well. And then within the dog park, within our budget, we're coming through with a corral entrance. There's one shade structure within that. We also have called out for a water fountain there, and it's for humans and it's also for dogs. There's the human level bowl, then there's a dog level bowl, and so we're thinking about everybody here. So the circulation, that kind of takes care of the dog there. Then we have a bridge that we'll be installing that's the same character that other pedestrian bridges in Superior are. So we have that. Once you cross that, and also to help define that, you kind of see with that dark line, that's the 50-foot buffer on the north. We're guiding them into that with a nice open rail fence. Again, it's fairly suggestive as to how to direct people, but we're also giving that direction to get people to go across the bridge. So immediately upon crossing the bridge, you can veer off to the east again with the 9-hole disc golf, or we have a couple options. There's an immediate pathway that goes into the mountain bike skills course as well. So to talk about the disc golf for a minute, we're coming in. We have a sign there to direct people. We also have a little warm-up hole there. As people are waiting to start or whatever, they can just loosen up. It's a good meeting place to meet your friends who you're going to be playing with. And then we've located a 9-hole course going around the perimeter of this to take advantage as much as possible of the inherent quality of Rock Creek along there. And also, you can see by where the tees are and the kind of the area, and also the holes for the, we're keeping that entirely outside of that 50-foot buffer. And even the alignment of the holes where the throws will be going are designed to minimize people going down into that 50-foot buffer. If it was me out there, I'd be all over the place. But a lot of these people have a lot more skill, and so they, you know, it has been laid out to do that. Also, one thing I want to point out, also something worth bringing up, we are also providing access from the east, too, and it is possible, even though the circulation's going this way, depending on where users are coming from, it is possible for them to park over in Flatirons Crossing and cross through the park, and even depending on how this is being used to play the course this way. So we're just thinking about that, even though this is definitely hole 1 and this is where you're intended to start. Coming around here, this is where the large knoll is at this point. So the circulation's going around that, coming up the hill here, and then going along the southern boundary, dropping back down before you hit the long 9th hole here. And also from an earlier iteration, we've adjusted things. Now there are no throws, there's no crossing that central path that's currently there. So we're minimizing potential for conflict in that as well. We're happy we could come up with a solution that took care of that. And then these are 3 existing ponds that are currently in place, and the play goes around those. So now we can move on and just talk briefly about the mountain bike skills course. And I'll talk about this. I'm going through this fairly quickly. You're all pretty familiar with this, but then the intention is to open it up for questions and to answer any more specific questions you might have. So we anticipate the primary entry. Users will be coming from this direction. We have the primary entry on the south side of the mountain bike skills course, but you can see there is a path that does lead into the course also from this parking area up on the north side of the creek. Within the actual mountain bike skills course, we have more detailed drawings that show this, but it is kind of zoned and identified through different user types in there, all the way from beginner to more advanced. And the skill sets and uses in here are laid out. We have kind of beginner, intermediate here as they first enter, and then also on the far side are some more intermediate uses. But as you come in through the main gate, you can peel off to those, and then there's more advanced skill development in the center of that. And so if you have more questions, after we go through this, we can answer those in more detail for you. So with that, that's kind of a real brief overview. On other things, when we were talking about this Rock Creek and how much we wanted to maintain the quality of that, as Juanita mentioned, we do have water quality pond. This whole dog park naturally drains to the north and east. So we're taking advantage of that, letting the drainage continue that way into a swale on this edge with some tiered water quality ponds that go into the main pond here at the lower end. And also within the mountain bike skills course, the natural drainage that we're taking advantage of, and actually integrated some of the different uses in there. We also, in the center part right there, also have a water quality pond. So that will detain water and runoff before it would leave the site. So we've integrated all those elements into the, wherever it needs to be integrated in the overall park design to make sure that we're really maintaining the water quality in Rock Creek. So with that, I can turn it back over if you want to talk more about the funding aspect of that, or wait till the questions
I'll
go.
look at the specifics.
Okay.
Specific areas. Just to give you a better idea of each one of the specific areas, we'll show a closer look of the bike park and then the dog park.
Let's start with the bike park. Nick, do you want to get up? Nick was much more involved in the specific design.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for having us this evening. So the mountain bike park. Luckily, we had some great people who work with us.
If you, yeah, I'm sorry if you wouldn't mind, just closer to the mic. Thanks.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
good.
So we had some great people to kind of give us a little bit of guidance in this one. But generally, what we were trying to do is trying to think about how to get the ball rolling with the mountain bike skills course in Town Superior. How do we begin to plant that seed of use and getting this going so kids start to get in there, kids and adults alike start getting in there, seeing what they like, figuring out really what the components are, what the movements are and the flow are, so the town can, in the future, expand or change the course to fit those needs. Because in a lot of cases, these kind of parks really are modular pieces. They're made of dirt, made of wood and stone. They change over time. They're almost more custom tailored to the community. So with that, we start with a very kind of basic set of components. From the entry up in the parking lot area, you come down. It's a typical dual track, which is two 18-inch paths separated by a 36-inch grass buffer, very similar to a car wheel track, maybe in the woods you might have seen. From there, two-way path direction, you enter into this eastern area, which has a couple basic skills: log rides, teeter-totters, a few rock courses to bring the awareness of what that off-balance feel is really like to a rider. Nothing too high. Heights are kept pretty much below 36 inches, so a very beginner level of skills at that point. As you pass through there, options to left and right for the rider to choose what fits their skill set the best. As they approach the main area, you would start finding a little bit more difficult things like jumps, berms, things that really work with more of a G-force, I guess, a rolling experience to continue movement. In there, this is a drop-in mound, which is basically a large mound, 4 to 6 feet tall, that provides the preliminary inertia to get the ball rolling. From that, two directions. To the left, a couple of large tabletops, which are just large jumps with flattened tops that provide a really high jump option. And to the right, a couple of rollers, and the option to circle back through one skill feature, and then down to the south, and if you'd like to continue on, some rock features, and then a couple more jumps before the rider returns back to the tabletop. Over here to the west, you will see a basic pump track, very basic component you see in a lot of parks. What that really is it's a track that allows the rider to use their own inertia and a more of a pumping motion so they can propel themselves through the course, really feeling the way the bike moves, feeling the momentum, without really needing to focus so much on pedaling or a lot of changing components. It's a very consistent track that offers a very repetitive, rhythm, if you will. So that was how we began, really answering the call of how do we look at a bike course or a skills course in this area. As Student Urban to kind of into this, we saw this area across the creek that we were like, wow, it's a really beautiful slope. We thought there's some really amazing opportunities there, and we couldn't help ourselves but to think, when this does take off, because it will. The kids have already begun it on their own. Who knows what happens when there's a little bit of funding or community support behind it? What happens for the more advanced riders? How do you begin to appease them? Look to how you can help them get even better. We thought about engaging the creek in a controlled manner. And to see this, this is actually a fence, a two-rail fence that does define space and really frame it out so we know what is bike park, what is not. And so with that, you cross the creek. This is an ascending area. So what you're seeing here, if I could walk it for 1 second, sorry. We're increasing grade by 20 feet from baseline here up to your entry point. Pardon me. And so with that, just looking at ascending and then descending skills. How riders can begin to think about very similar needs they would have experienced along the Front Range. And just a couple different levels of that. And then moving on. Which one would you like me to go to next? This is a shot of the alternative for the dog park location. Given the site, as mentioned earlier, topography is a really big component. We have major gain loss in elevation, and so looking for flat area was really the biggest question for the dog park, as we need to kind of explain for erosion and other needs. This area to the far northeast of the park was the best fit for that. Really good access to the east end of the park, and it also provided a little bit more buffer from the homeowners to the north and south. Unfortunately, it is a little bit further than we would have liked from the parking area, which is right up here. Extra construction costs, as Brenda also alluded to, getting that water, that's a really long run to bring it from the plant, has to cross over the creek, and looking at other forms of water, like be the bike park or otherwise, very long run to get that over there, which is a pretty high cost. Slopes we already talked about, and most obviously the conflict with the golf course. As you can see here, we've really pushed the golf course out as far as we could while not going into that buffer, but with that, it obviously causes a conflict. As much as dogs love frisbees, I don't think we want to see that mixed in this situation. Sure. And then going to the dog park as designed. Okay. So talk to the phase 1 or the phase 2? Okay. Okay, so the preferred dog park. With this, I'll run quickly through. Originally, we were looking at the split along the bottom for the phase 1. We realized that for funding reasons and to create efficiency, as John spoke, we moved the entry over to the west side, which, 2 big points on that. One, it's great as far as getting the dogs where they need to be. As John kind of said, we really want to get those folks moving around that clockwise side of the circle, dogs in, having a good time doing what they do best. Corral, gate, airlock concept, go into gates, not going to see a whole lot of problem there. And also by pulling that feature up along the side, we're actually about able to save the design cost of $10,000 just by saying, hey, how can we think about a more efficient way to move people and reducing materials costs, reducing the need for extra materials. 1.25 acres. At this point, phase 1, this is what we found to be the most efficient size. We really didn't want to go under 1 acre, so this is a good start. And like John said again, we have drainage moving to the northeast into a bioswale, so letting a lot of the ammonia that will be in that groundwater be treated through natural processes, which is great to see. Before it gets in here, it has to be dealt with by a mechanical process. Good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So quickly, I know we've taken a lot of time tonight, but I appreciate it. Quickly, I wanted to talk about the budget. Still, budget 363 has been budgeted for the project. The entire project is within that 363 number. I don't know if you have any other questions regarding the entire project. One of the things I wanted to do this evening was to ensure that if the board was looking at this as something we wanted to move forward with, and letting you know that Great Outdoors Colorado is still a good option for this particular park with the 3 amenities on this 36 acres. If we were to proceed, we would come back to the board with a resolution that would support the project in a grant application for Great Outdoors Colorado. Questions?
Thanks very much for the presentations. Questions or comments from the board? Trustee Williams, I see a lean.
Thank you for that great presentation. I'm curious to know the 50 feet, or you mentioned the center line, 100 feet, 50 feet on one side, 50 on the other. Is the center line, I'm assuming, is the bottom of the creek? Okay. I was wondering if we could look at, kind of went over there and looked at it, and a few of us walked 50 feet and kind of from center line, and it's not very far. And when we visually look at it when we're on the property, we were kind of envisioning 50 feet from the bank, the edge of the bank, where it kind of drops off, or whatever you want to call the high water line, or break line. Okay. So I was wondering if you could address that. Is that something that you could make this work if you were asked to do that?
The answer is yes. We certainly could, and but there are some issues surrounding that. I'll just talk about it for a minute. The 50 feet is, we looked at a couple things there. One was we have the real drainage channel, and then there's that top of bank where it flattens off. So we looked at that, kind of understood how that worked, and then understanding the intensity of uses and how we could put those things together, we said let's make sure we have a clear buffer that's a reasonable distance away from that top of bank. And so we looked at that and said, okay, let's go with 50 feet. Because just the farther away, some of the intensity of uses, I think we've also addressed that in some other ways, even how we're directing traffic and the users, keeping the dogs a little farther away, directing with just some of the two-rail fence on the bridge and things like that are helping. But to answer your question, if you have a concern or you believe it should be larger than that, we really are addressing with that 50 feet on each side. We're doing a good job to address water quality, I think, and erosion and water going back in the channel itself. But we can certainly look at that. I think the area on the north, in fact, the slide that's up right now is showing to get this 1.25 acres, that the green line, that's the 50 foot from the center line, and that's not a coincidence that that's where we have that set back to. So trying to balance the users, the circulation, keeping that back, keeping the dog park at a reasonable size. There's some constraints on the north side, I think, but there are lots of options. There are lots of ways to go. Anything from if we expand that, say another 25 or 30 feet, and maybe we can have another site visit to go out and more clearly understand some of your site-specific concerns out there. That will shrink, obviously, the size of this, and we can't really go too far to the east. But there is potential to reconstruct this or design this slightly differently to allow us to come out into this area. So there is some room there. Those are the only constraints that come to mind here. On the south side, I think there is certainly more flexibility because we do have so much room there. What we are trying to do is come up with a good balance between a great user experience for the disc golf and also maintaining a reasonable buffer. So the answer to your question is yes. We can certainly look at that.
And then also, I'm also curious about the cost of the dog park. Looking at $117,000. Is that about right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and how much of that includes grass and irrigation?
I don't have those numbers
Okay.
specifically.
Have we looked at not having grass for the dog park and doing gravel? And I see that as an option B. But I was curious as to how less expensive that would be.
It would be less expensive, and Prosec did look at that, and as you said, it was option B. It would be less expensive. However, I think in the long term, it would be more expensive to maintain. I think that there's a lot more that will be needed as far as putting gravel in the dog park, and you'll have to continue to put that gravel in the dog park as the dog park ages. So you'll trade one situation for another. So you'll have additional costs for gravel, which isn't cheap, and then you'll have to put in additional gravel as you move forward.
Have we looked at other dog parks in the area and how they maintain, whether it's grass or gravel, especially gravel, and what their upkeep costs are on those?
Yes, we have.
So do we have those figures
Which figures?
for the other dog parks that are in the area?
So-
as far as their upkeep on gravel or grass?
No, but we have our own figures that I've put together as far as maintenance for grass in that 1.2 acre site is less than $6,000 a year to maintain the grass area. The standard for grass is $6,000 to $9,000 a year for maintenance. As far as gravel, we've looked at a lot of different sites within the community and have found that there are different types of dog parks out there. There are dog parks that are in the open space, and those particular dog parks, not too concerned with the way that the area looks. However, from a lot of time out in those areas, the native grasses do tend to become very minimal, and you end up with a lot of dirt and a lot of dust. On the flip side, with an area like Louisville has, Louisville initially had some grass in their area, but took it out because it wasn't in their maintenance plan to continue to maintain that area. What they wish they would have done differently is used a separation and continued the grass. However, they have now went to gravel, and it's an afterthought. This is not an afterthought. This is something that we've looked at from the beginning to make sure that we can maintain in the standards that the town has made so well known.
So continually replacing the grass and the irrigation to maintain the grass is less or more than doing gravel?
We wouldn't continually...
in maintenance, I mean.
We wouldn't continually replace the irrigation. We would continue to maintain the grass areas, but it would be less in the long run.
So the upkeep for grass and irrigation would be less than the upkeep for gravel?
Yes.
Okay. By how much?
You know, I don't have that figure with me tonight.
Okay.
Trustee Gregoris and then Trustee Gomez.
Yeah, I don't have a question, it's more of a comment. I wanted to thank staff and PROSAC for the diligence that you took in making this proposal. I know that you've addressed a lot of the questions and the concerns that the board had and some of the citizens had, so I just want to applaud you for that, because I know this took a lot of work to bring it to this point. Now, having said that, as I look at all three of these amenities, I see different parts of the population of Superior being affected, and I say that as more of a compliment. I can see kids enjoying the youth, certainly young adults, even some of the older adults like myself. I think this will bring a wonderful addition and maybe even become a regional draw. I can almost foresee in the summertime, especially when it's hot, people come and play, they enjoy themselves, and then they go across the street and go to Baskin-Robbins or get some pizza and, help some of our businesses here in Rock Creek. So I have been following this for a long time, and I'm obviously strongly in favor of this proposal.
Thanks. Trustee Gomez.
I have a lot of things to say about this, and I'm going to try to be as fast as I usually try. One is that I like this park. I think it brings a lot of benefit to the community. I like that it's away from the creek, but the focus is on the creek. I do like the suggestion of considering looking at 50 feet from the bank as opposed to 50 feet from the center, but with maybe a little bit of a flattening of the oval, that would be fine. But I like that it's sort of in a different area of town, kind of, as well, which sort of adds park access to more people. I very much like this idea that you have of having the open area in the middle of the oval, as well as some of the other areas that allow for expansion or of these original plans, but maybe, for instance, that oval could easily have a children's play thing so that people could be walking, dealing with the dog, but to have their kids entertained as well. I think that's a really smart idea to have that kind of an open area to start with and see what evolves. I like the look and feel being very minimal, and there's nothing here that's going to cause a big structure, and I think that's great. It leaves it about as close to natural with it being a play area as you possibly can, I think. I like the idea of the community between the three different areas. I would like people to be, to say hello to the people with the dogs and people with the bikes and the whatever. I kind of like that initial area that sort of parses you out, but also serves as a joining area. I like the fact that it's a relatively large dog park. That 1.25 acres is a plus. We've previously dealt with things like fields and things for people who have kids. I think it's probably time we deal with things equivalent for people who don't have kids or do have dogs. So I think it's probably about time for us to deal with the dog issue.
We can have both.
Exactly. I like the shelters and the water fountains. I think you could use some more shaded or shelter-type areas. That's one thing that I think would be a big plus in this area. And I very much like the fact that there's access from at least 3 or 4 sides. So you can get there from the horizons, you can get there from that direction, you can get there from under Safeway, and you can get there from the main parking area. I think that's a real plus. I like the fact that the users may be involved in the O&M for this as well, because they're going to be very interested in making sure that they're well maintained, and that they may suggest modifications to it to enhance the users' sort of happiness with it already, and the fact that there are many types of users, as Trustee Goodwillis mentioned as well. The couple of comments that I might make would be that it might be good to keep the first parking spot as sort of almost like when you go to collect to-go food at restaurants, that closest one is for the yard waste site, so that people can get right there to the yard waste site. I would suggest an alternative to the. I would like to see an alternative to the bridge as planned, and I spoke with the folks who were planning this, and thank you very much for arranging that tour last week. That was really helpful. To consider possibly one of the plastic extruded bridges that are very good looking, but also very cost effective and very weather resistant, just as an alternative to be considered in the cost estimates. I'm interested in what our liability might be for a skills course, so if there's anything liability oriented, I'd just like us to know what that is. As I said, I think we need more shaded areas. The dog area needs one for sure, and if there's an opportunity to provide inexpensive shade areas, I think that's a plus. The most important comment that I have, I think, is the issue of the size and the makeup of the dog park. I'm a fan of gravel because I don't think the choice is between gravel and grass, but rather twice as much gravel and half as much grass, because when you've spoken about grass, you're talking about rotating 2 areas. That means that at any one time, half of it is open. I'd rather have a 1.5 or 1 1/4 gravel dog park than half of that times a grass dog park. That would be my choice. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee D'Souza?
Thanks. So we're pretty much out of time, and I just wanted to say I appreciate the work that has been done on this. I think there are, from what I see on this plan compared to the other plans, there's a lot of things that have mitigated the issues that we spoke about, specifically creek crossing and also that extra dog run that was more towards the east. So I'm glad to see that that's been removed. As far as there's a lot of issues. The parking, I'm happy with the way that's been set up, and that there aren't that there's the fence so that you don't have the dogs just sort of running all over. That it's more directed, right. and also that there's less opportunity for people to go directly into the creek, people or dogs or kids. I think one of the concerns that were brought up before was from Reliance Circle and some of the views, and we went and looked at where the parking lot would be, and I think it's good as far as Reliance Circle that you don't really see the parking, but I do have some concerns about what will be done for the people in Saddlebrook to see if they're going to be looking down on that. I know we're trying to keep the cost down, but some trees or a few other things like that might be good. I'm happy with I'm happy with the way things are progressing in this. I think it's there's still a lot of concerns. I would love to see things a little closer to some of our retail and restaurants, but I think that this is moving in a good direction.
Maybe we could have a sign that says,
please go this way. Yeah, get your coffee over there.
Whatever.
And I would have been happy to have had this plan for us for this work session. That would have been nice if we had had that beforehand, and also maybe some of the new figures. So I'm really hoping that we'll have, when this comes forward again, that we'll have some, better numbers and plans for sure.
But I am much happier with $117,000
Absolutely.
dog park than $250,000
Yes,
dog
absolutely.
park. So that's a major improvement.
Yeah, but I'll just keep that out for now.
Trustee Cirilli.
Very briefly, there's nothing much more to say. I support what you have now developed. I supported what you presented before to the extent of, with the one caveat that I didn't, environmental issues were brought up, but we didn't really know. And so my only issue was if there was an environmental issue, then I had a problem with the dog park then. This appears to not have a problem. I'm not sure if there ever was a problem. I did look at the site. I think this does minimize any impact to neighbors. It's a park, and I think it's good. I hope this is the thumbs up we're giving to proceed, so we don't have any more. The grass versus no grass is a tough issue. I have, if we have grass that's overwatered, that's worse than having gravel. We have a tendency to overwater at times in our park. So Trustee Skumac brings up a good point about if half the grass is laid aside for regeneration, then you're really talking about less than a 1.2 acre park for the dogs. I'm open on that. I suppose that decision can still be made. The budget's good, even considering grass. And if we try grass and it doesn't work, then I guess we can always back out of that at some point. But I support you. I appreciate the hard work that ProStack and everyone's put into this, and I think you got a good product that we can proceed with.
Anything else from the board? Let's. Can I have just are people here to speak about this particular issue? I just want to, or if it's a different issue tonight, because. Okay, so I think we're just going to. Okay, so I'd like to just keep going. Then we'll start the meeting a little bit late. I was trying to figure out how to do this in the agenda, but if we just have a couple of comments, and I think we should just proceed with that. So I'll entertain. Director Dominguez, do you have anything else you wanted to add at the moment?
No.
Okay, so we will come back to how to proceed after this, but anybody who would like to speak to this particular issue tonight, I'd invite them forward if you wouldn't mind at the mic, and then name and address if you would. Sorry about my cold tonight. I'm a little under the weather.
Phyllis, you want to turn the lights on?
Hello, my name's John Nybarger. I live at 1514 East Baldona Way. I'm the chairman of the Open Space Advisory Committee and also a member of the ProStack Committee. So I wanted to just say that from an open space perspective, I've heard a lot on the park side, but I wanted to address the open space, that I think this is a really well-balanced plan. I think some of the ideas of moving the 50-foot buffer from the center line to the bank, I think, is a great idea, and being sort of sensitive with still not making the dog park too small on that side, but definitely on the other side, I think is a great suggestion. But just the idea of protecting that vital wildlife habitat. I was there on Sunday, and we saw numerous coyotes running around. It was really in fresh snow. It was really beautiful, and being able to protect that again from the open space perspective, I think, is good. So that the retention areas on the bike skills course, and then also the the catchment area with the pump to be able to send the wastewater from the dog park directly into the wastewater treatment plant so it doesn't end up in the creek, I think are some really good ways of dealing with some of the open space issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shelley Chotek. I live at 1880 Eldorado Circle, and I've been very interested in seeing a disc golf course put in here in Superior. And I like the location of the course. However, I'd like to see some more design aspects incorporated, and I think that there are people actually here in this room that are real active in disc golf and have designed courses. And one of those people is, I believe, John Bird is here, who's been real active in the Arvada golf course. So I would like to get some input from people who have designed courses, and there may be some other things we can do to make it more interesting so that we get a lot of play. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Steve Smith, 653 Eaton Circle. A couple of things I want to point out on the dog park is I don't know if this was commented on, but is there access, whether it's gravel or grass, for people with disabilities? Because I think it might be difficult to get through there if it's gravel or grass. So something they might want to think about. The second comment I have is that if you're going to put the Frisbee golf in here, there's an opportunity to maybe get some sponsorship, permanent sponsorship from businesses in the community to help pay for this. I know that my business would be interested in sponsoring one of these golf holes if it were something of permanent nature, not a sign that can be destroyed. So those were the only two comments I had. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, additional public comment, yeah. And then we'll have to move on to the regular meeting.
Hi there, my name is Lee McCormack. I live in Boulder, 243 Linden Drive, and I'm a bike park designer. And regarding that specific aspect, I wanted to say that the space that they have spec'd out there looks really good. There's a lot of really good potential there. I wanted to mention to you guys that we built a very similar park in Lyons last year. It was built with a lot of volunteer effort, real community support. It's been a huge success, and right now we're planning the phase 2. So now we're going to add some shade structures, some seating areas, and we're going to enhance the bike park terrain. So that's been a real success and a real good model. I also want to let you guys know that, well, part of that success of that was, I spearheaded the design and the construction, but we got a lot of support from area mountain bikers for volunteer work days. And the Boulder Mountain Bike Alliance is kind of the big club or group here in this county, and they support projects like this. They came out in force with the International Mountain Bike Association with tools, helped in Lyons. I've been talking to them about this potential project. They can't promise anything, of course. They have a lot of things on their plate, but this is exactly the sort of thing that they do support. Luckily, in this county, there are a lot of projects like this. The sooner we can make a decision, I guess, and get on their calendar, the better our chances for them to come out. Just as an analog, in Lyons, they mobilized very quickly over 30 people with full tool sets, snacks, and we had the bike park rideable in a half a day. So there you go.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we need to wrap this up. So just one quick question then for the director. GOCO grants, our application is due when?
So the Great Outdoor Colorado application is due March 2nd, but I did talk to the director of Great Outdoors Colorado that said that I could get a resolution from the Board of Trustees as late as March 9th. I know that the board has a meeting on March 8th. We can have a resolution on the consent agenda that approves the concept of this and the application to Great Outdoors Colorado and include that. We've been working with a lot of people here tonight in regards to support letters and the like to assist not only as partners but as volunteers. And again, they have written some really good support letters. We've been working on the grant regardless. If we can't use the grant now, we can probably use it some other day. So we're ready to go.
And GOCO, I haven't read a grant for them. How specific are they happy to say this is the rough area? These are the areas in general. We don't need to have exactly where each jump might be.
No, they don't need that specificity. What they need to know is the bottom line budget dollar numbers and the application dollar amount that we would request. At this time, I would be requesting $150,000 for the $363,000 project total.
Okay. And I assume that we're working with urban drainage when they're they'll be working in this area.
Definitely, and that's part of
Clearly
some of the advantages to building this. They are a partner. They're willing to work with us, bid the project out together, make sure that we have cost effectiveness going throughout the construction of the project and putting together the entire project.
Okay, so I'm going to just pull that we're not going to be voting tonight on anything in particular, but I just want to make sure. I think I heard that people feel comfortable with the general direction that we're moving here, and we should continue with that. Thank you very much also for the presentation. So I would recommend then, I think there's some interest in about specific parts of the bike course and the disc golf, perhaps a community meeting associated with that, coming back forward, because this obviously is coming back before the board because of the budgetary implications associated with that. What time frame would you anticipate for that?
For another meeting with the community or a meeting?
No. Well, when would you anticipate coming before the board again for approval for budget issues?
So what we would do is wait for the grant cycle, which is in June. They would give us an approval in June, and then we would come to the board very shortly after that. So we could be looking at a July date, regardless. If the application is denied, we would still come to the board with a phased approach to the project, and then move forward that way. So we're talking about July before we come back and talk about bidding out a project.
Okay, so because I've heard some questions about budgetary issues and gravel versus grass, we need to firm those things up. So we can either do that trying to do that during a meeting or another work session.
We can do that probably sooner rather than later, and we don't need to necessarily wait until Great Outdoors gives us that approval.
Okay, great.
So I will make sure that we write the grant so that it addresses both.
Okay, great. And once again, I think probably having maybe another citizens engagement might be. It sounds like there's a lot of interest out there about the particular aspects of this, and probably
as a matter of fact,
more.
we've been talking to the two individuals that they requested us talk to.
Very good.
We have been doing it.
Okay, great. Thanks. Trustee Skometz and then Trustee Williams, and then we really need to move on.
Sure, sorry. I think my only question is that if you can put the grant in for GOCO anyway, and it doesn't affect what happens, then it seems to me, couldn't we start earlier so we don't lose a whole season? I mean, if we don't start construction until July, then
as part of the grant, as part of the grant application, they will not let us begin construction.
Okay.
But we could be ready to go as soon as it's approved. Trustee Williams?
Yeah, and I also wanted to find out how much funds we have with Colorado Trust Fund, what the amount we have now, what we're getting soon, and then how that pans out with the grant and what our total out-of-pocket would be from the town.
Total out-of-pocket is $213 budgeted over the next 2 years, 2010, 2011. The town receives between $100,000 and $105,000 a year in CTF or Conservation Trust Fund monies on an annual basis.
And do we have any currently?
Certainly. I don't know what the current balance is, but yes, we do.
So we're pretty close to the 213 or whatever number you mentioned?
Over the course of the 2 years, we'll be getting that much.
So really,
regardless of what the fund balance is, but we do have a fund balance in our CTF like we do in all of our other funds.
Okay, so then also, does the CTF funds, can they be used for maintenance of parks that are already existing?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. And thank you very much for all your hard work. It was a very nice presentation and answered a lot of questions. So we're going to take a 30-second break at the moment, and then we're going to move on to the regular meeting.
But you won't be able to ask your question.
Let me know. Really.
Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order Town of Superior Board of Trustees and Superior Metropolitan District Number 1 Board of Directors and Superior McCaslin Interchange Metropolitan District Board of Directors for February 22nd, 2010. And Phyllis, if you'd call a roll.
Sure. Mayor Andrew Michael.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lisa Skumatz.
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli.
Here.
Dana D'Souza.
Here.
Elia Gagoris.
I'm here.
George Kuffner.
Here.
Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Scott Randall.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Wilson.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, approve the agenda. I'm going to just recommend to the town manager, we didn't get to the town board goal. Perhaps you could do that during your part of it. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't have any other changes to tonight's agenda. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda by Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee Gregoris. Discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. Mr. Randall, do you want to start out with that?
We'll pick up the second agenda item that we had under the workshop session, which was a second review of the town board's goals. We briefly discussed this 2 weeks ago. Regarding the 9-page goal statement, which was the work product from the board's recent strategic planning retreat, there were 2 specific changes that the board had requested. One had to do with the employment outreach effort, not so much opening up the unemployment assistance office, but providing some outreach assistance, job fairs and the like. And then we revised the communication and complaint link on the website as a result of some second thoughts on the part of the board. Those were the only 2 directed changes that we'd received from the board on the 9 pages. There was more substantial discussion regarding the summary goal statement. So if we're comfortable with what we have on the retreat work product, moving to the goal statement, which will ultimately go up to the board, we merged the economic sustainability and development opportunities into one. We added an environmental initiative. I did steal from something we used 2 or 3 years ago regarding Live Green, if there's a better name or title for it. But the idea of incorporating all of the environmental initiatives that are being proposed for the coming year. And then we did add to the 2 others that had been raised, and there seemed to be some support for, referencing the service sharing opportunities with other jurisdictions and deleting the reference that we didn't want to pursue regarding communications.
Okay, questions or comments from the board, Trustee Skumatz?
I think the only changes I might make would be minor word changes on the overall town board's goals. And it wouldn't be expand public services. I'd say enhance or something, because expand seems to mean to me spend lots more money, and I'm not sure that's what we really mean there. So I might consider a different word than expand. And Live Green, I might consider the use of the word sustainability somewhere in there. Live sustainably or something like that, or more sustainably. That's it. I like your changes. Thank you.
Yes, I like the changes there.
I tried not to repeat the same words, so enhance being in, but we'll come up with something.
Yeah, I thought this was much better.
Okay.
Much.
I have just one comment, and it's a minor one, and it doesn't really need to change if you so feel, but it had to do with the enhance/expand public services. The recreational amenities seemed like that was an enhancement. I would move that into a different category. But once again, that's kind of a minor issue, and I'm happy to leave it where it is if you like, which is in the public infrastructure. So whatever your pleasure is. Anything else about this?
In the next consent agenda or something?
Yes, I think that probably makes sense. So
Bring it back in 2 weeks?
Just in the consent agenda for formal approval, and we can put it on the wall. I mean, we don't really have to prove anything like this. But
holding up the distribution of the annual report, because the last half page of the annual report is the 2010 goals.
We're good then.
Go ahead,
Yeah. Okay. Unless anybody wants them. Okay. What else did you have?
In terms of the items for the next agenda, it's going to be a relatively light meeting. The one thing I would advise the board is that we may have a number of unanticipated items coming forward, since this is the board's last meeting on March 8th, March 8th. Will be the board's last meeting as the currently constituted board. You don't have a second meeting in March, and the first meeting in April will be the new board.
Why no second meeting in March?
Because it's spring break.
Spring break? You can't get a quorum.
George and I will be here.
I'd be there.
Is it possible to
This
do
is
the Monday
always the
after?
issue.
I
is
think
that
you have
we
to
kind
poll council and see if we have a meeting or not have a meeting.
It has been.
I'd be certainly glad to do whatever the board wishes.
Yeah.
The board, up to this point in time, has not been able to convene a meeting whenever Boulder Valley schools are out. We'll do whatever you want. It's been on your look-ahead for 3 months.
Yeah, and we do this every year, so. I
What
guess,
about the Monday after school starts again? Is that a possibility or no?
I guess it depends on how much we have to do.
That would be the 29th?
29th?
Library.
I believe school is out those first 2 days,
Yeah,
too,
they're
so.
still
Yeah, but I'm here. I mean, I'm in town. I don't know who else.
We can poll and see who's available.
Phyllis will send out one of her famous emails to see who's around.
For the
29th?
22nd and the 29th.
12 days.
Okay.
22nd, I'm gone.
I am
Okay.
gone on the 22nd as well,
I'm here on the 29th.
All right.
but I'm here on the 29th.
I'm
We
here on
will,
the 29th.
people will, we will formalize this.
And see if,
Yeah.
this one is a unique month as well, since you have 5 Mondays in the month of March.
Okay, what else?
The 3 Mile Plan, which is the annual review of our extraterritorial borders, a number of PROS agreements, Mustangs, Lacrosse, HOAs, Rock Creek Flyers, and the like. And then the most significant item will be the 2 public hearings, both on the Rocky Mountain Fire Protection District expanded facilities, both on the final development site plan as well as the 3 zoning variations.
Okay. Ms. Carberry, anything from you?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Ms. Harden, anything from you? Trustee Kupfer?
Yeah, I want to know when the board's going to act on this Mrs. Bennett's request that you have in front of you. I requested a long time ago that the board have a meeting on this, and there was legal questions at the time, and we were advised not to do this. So I'm asking when we're going to make a decision on what can be done here on this house on the 2nd. It's in front of me tonight. I just got it in my box. It seems like we keep postponing an answer for.
Well, whatever the desire of the board is, I mean, I think we
We got to get to the problem, get it solved.
I think it's come up, and I thought we addressed it.
I think we already discussed it. And we
You
decided.
discussed it and you said there was legal questions and we couldn't act on any situation. She requested that her sewer and water be transferred from lots 122 Coal Creek to over 202 Maple Street.
And
The board
I
was
don't think that's a board's.
the board was advised that that was contrary to the SMD1 rules.
I have a question there, sir. The town is not legally, as far as I'm concerned, we are in SM1, we're serviced by the Superior Metropolitan District, but the town is separate from the district on that question. The town paid for their own sewer lines, they paid for their own water lines on grant money. These people paid for their own permits to the city of Louisville to have their sewer permits, so they do own their sewer permits. It was paid for. And they were guaranteed at the time that if they had a sewer permit, they would get a water permit when the grants were available. So what would be the problem of her transferring her lots from 122 Coal Creek to over 202 Maple Street? This is holding her up, and this board should make a decision. In fact, I'll even make a motion to do that.
Okay, Trustee Gregores?
Is that something that the board can vote on?
The board can't vote, but the SMD1 district can vote on either waiving or altering its rules.
Okay. And what's the con? What's would keep us from voting yes on this? I mean, what is in the argument? There's pros and cons. What's the
First of all, water and sewer rights run with the property. They don't go with the owner.
Okay.
If I have water, I can't sell that right to somebody else. It stays with my structure, with my lot, which was the reason that the rules that are existing, why they were developed in that way. The uniqueness of this situation is the property in question at 122 East Coal Creek, while it has rights to water and sewer, has never accessed those rights. Now, I don't know if they're still valid rights, because I've never looked at their utility bills to see if they've been making the obligatory monthly payments to the town. There's still an obligation to make monthly payments to maintain access to the water and sewer. I don't know. I've not looked into that. But the issue here is you can't pick them up and transfer them.
Can you reimburse them and then put those funds towards a different property? Can you reimburse?
Can I abandon my water and sewer? If I fail to pay my monthly bill, I lose my rights. Would the town buy them back? I can't imagine why.
I guess, is there a way to find a solution for Ms. Bennett? I guess that's what can we make it happen?
What is it that you want to make happen? We've had 3 different requests. One is to leave a structure that's illegally parked on another property.
No, just transferring the tap fees, because that's the only thing I have in front of me right here.
You've had different requests at each of your last 3 meetings.
It's some that we couldn't deal with because...
Not without violating your own rules.
Right.
The pending court case had nothing to do with this request. You were asked to interfere or intercede in a pending judicial matter to advise the municipal judge to not act in a certain way. That you were cautioned, don't do. This has nothing to do with that pending court case, which is still pending.
And she came up with a timetable that doesn't require us to act, that deals with having the house moved to Coal Creek, right?
We have been advised that they have contracted to move the illegal structure off of the property on which it sits. Where it moves to has yet to be determined.
No, her letter here that she gave us.
We have a letter here.
I understand. Until it moves, we don't know where it's going to go. This started 1.5 years ago when there was a request to replat the lots at 2nd and Maple. And then that's mysteriously just stopped mid-process after it got submitted to the Planning Commission. So I don't want to take anything. I don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
Well, this Coal Creek plan is the one she described when she came to my coffee buzz just recently and said she was going to send a timetable to all the board members about what her plan was for that. Did she follow up on that?
I wasn't at your coffee buzz, so I'm not privy to the conversation.
Good, thanks.
Well, I'm sure they've paid their dues, Scott, without no blinking eye. That's right on your water bill, and it's on your sewer bill. It was on your Louisville water or sewer bill. They haven't been used. The person's owned both pieces of property for over 70 years. There will be movement if we allow her to move her sewer and water. All she has to do is dig the ditch, the street, and transfer them from here to there. And if she ever uses them over on 122 Coal Creek, she'll have to buy them, or whoever buys the lot will have to buy them. We are holding her up from doing what she wants to do. And if we got to go through the Superior Metropolitan District to do it, let's do it.
Trustee D'Souza.
So she has the option to purchase fees for that property she wants to move it to, right? The town isn't stopping her from purchasing.
Absolutely not.
So what most people would do would be to purchase fees for the property that they're trying to put their home on. Correct. So if for some reason the Metro District, whichever one we're on, the directors, the whatever we are on that one, the other hat, said, sure, let's just let you swap stuff around. We've never done this before, but let's go ahead and do it. And then someone else came to us and then said, well, we want to do that. We said, well, now we don't want to. I mean, are those the type of things that really sets up problems for the board later on? Is that...
There's only 11 more tap fees in this town that is not being used that could be possibly transferred, which I don't think they will be.
So the thing is that we haven't done this before in the past, typically, right?
I don't see it in the Superior Metropolitan District.
George, just let me finish a second, George. We haven't done this before in the past.
You haven't done it, nor do your rules allow it. So the SMD District Board would be required to do one of two things, either amend its rules or to defer its rules for this particular circumstance.
And the property where those water rights currently exist, someone could build on that property using those rights.
There is a structure on that property today, but somebody, yes, could either access it for that structure or demolish it and put something new at that
So
at
that
location.
property needs those water rights if something else were to go on with it. I mean, doesn't each individual property have its own water rights
Yes.
typically? Okay.
So the traditional way would be you pay your water and sewer taps where you want to place the property.
Right.
I know in Rock Creek we don't quite have a lot of these issues, but I know growing up that we did, and we had subdivisions of property, and each of those areas had their own water rights. We never transferred around, and I mean they stayed with the property.
This is a unique situation.
So
It's a hardship situation.
It's a
Kind
hardship.
of what we're looking at.
yeah. But there's a lot of hardship situations at this time.
I agree, and I know.
I agree.
Trustee Kuffner, I think
Yeah.
that, up in most.
Okay. As much as I would like to help somebody out with a situation like this, I mean, we've heard this several times that they may have hardship any way they go around it. I really wish that this had been something taken care of before the house was moved. I mean, I don't think it's any secret what our fees are. I think that's certainly something that you could research in advance, and the fees for the
Connection to the water and sewer
connection
system.
fees and everything. Those are things that you can find out in advance. And so there's a lot of people in town right now that have a lot of hardships, and I am concerned about breaking our own rules and what precedents that sets. And so,
May I ask what the fees are if someone chose to?
There's a water system, sewer system, and a stormwater system tap-on fee. You just revise those fees, modestly reduce them. It's roughly $26,000 per single-family lot.
Ms. Bennett, I think if you'd like to have something to say. If you wouldn't mind, it just at the mic, sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't hear everything, but the only
And
reason
if you
that
wouldn't
I-
mind, just for the record, if you can just say who you are and where you,
Your name
if you
and
could just say
address.
your name and
Oh,
address,
I'm
sorry.
My name's Louise Bennett, and I own the move-on house at 2nd and Maple. And the only reason that I felt I could ask for the water and sewer is because the town offered me that if I sold my lots here real cheap. So I thought if it was possible to do it then, it might be possible. So that's why I, pushed asking for that.
Okay. Mr. Kuffner?
Well, I'm
Mr.
going to make a
Kuffner.
motion that we allow Mrs. Bennett to transfer her water and sewer from lots 122 Coal Creek to 202 Maple Street.
That'd be a motion by Director Kuffner. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Gagura's discussion. My discussion is that, I always want to help people out, do what we can, but, breaking our own rules for one particular person, while I'd love to do that in the big scheme of things, I just don't think that that's a very good precedent to set, and I don't think that I could support that.
and I just wanted to clarify, I think what the town offered before, it was a waiving of certain fees. I don't think it was a transferring of fees. So I'm not sure where that came up from. I mean, if we had offered something like that, I think it would be different, but I don't think that we offered before to break the rules.
Director Skumatz.
And I'm also not in favor of changing the rules, but I thought that an option had been created that was satisfactory, or we're pretty close, so.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah,
Director
next one
Sorelli.
coming. Go ahead.
I don't really want to vote on this tonight without some advice regarding the implications of waiving our rules.
Okay. Director Kuffner.
Can we seek that advice now?
If we don't vote on it tonight, can we get some advice so we can do something with this? If you people on the board would like to meet with Mrs. Bennett, that would be fine, to clarify some of the problems. I understand the problems because I live here. I was here when we formed the sewer system. I was here when we obtained the water lines into this town. The town owns the water lines from over here at the corner at the bottom of the hill all the way through town. The district does not own our lines. We're serviced by the district, and I have seen nothing in the Superior Metropolitan District rules that says you cannot transfer water rights in the original town of Superior and sewer.
May I just make a suggestion that we put this on an agenda, on an upcoming agenda, and I will be happy to provide the legal advice prior to that time as to what the implications are of waiving the rules in one specific instance. I'd rather not do that right now in public.
Okay.
So if I could do that confidentially, then I think that would be helpful.
I feel that's fair. We can do that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We have to vote, so have to finalize this up. So all in favor of the motion?
Now, which motion are we talking about?
George's motion.
What do you second?
Okay. Are we sure that it's going to go on the agenda next time? Is that our understanding? Yes. Or
The board knows its rules. You were polled multiple times. Anything can get on the agenda when two of you ask for it.
Okay.
all right.
Two of you haven't asked for it until tonight.
Yes. So the two of us are asking for it tonight.
All right. So all in favor?
I'll withdraw my motion, Mayor, and ask for.
Well, let's just, we can vote, it can vote down, and
Okay.
just for technicality, and then we can go to the next meeting. So all in favor?
I'm in favor.
In favor is Director Kupner and Director Kurz. Opposed? Cirelli, Skumatz, Muckle, D'Souza, and Williams. So that fails, and so I believe that the, whatever your title is, the Director of the Metropolitan District, number 1, will have that put on our next meeting of the Metropolitan District for further discussion.
And when's that
attorney
next
advice.
meeting then?
The 8th.
The 8th.
2 weeks.
Okay.
The agenda's expanding already.
Right. Okay, let's see.
Mayor, they only give her 30 days extension on to get the house property moved. She would like some type of an answer so she knows what she's going to do. Either move the house over here on Coal Creek, which I would rather not see because it's next to the town lots. So,
Okay.
if as soon as possible, I'd appreciate it very much.
Yep, next meeting. Mr. Randall.
Which will be when?
Deborah just asked.
Huh?
I go back to, now you're getting back into the court litigation. And I would also go back and remind the board, as you've received information multiple times, Mrs. Banner is not a party in the current matters that are sitting before the municipal court.
Yes.
It's Mr. Mitchell, you mean? Right? No?
Yes.
So where we're at is that this is coming back at the next meeting for further discussion about this particular issue, not the court issue, and we're obtaining legal advice.
Yes.
Okay. Mr.
Thank
Kupner.
you.
Yes. Trustee Kupner, anything else?
No, sir.
Trustee Srelly.
No, I have nothing.
Trustee Kumatz.
Just a couple of short things. One is that the Consortium of Cities is going to have, I couldn't make the last meeting, so Trustee Williams is going to give that update.
I did last
okay.
time.
But the next meeting is going to be held, the next meeting is going to be held on the 3rd, and it's going to be discussed from 7 to 9 in Boulder, and it's going to be discussing medical marijuana, so that ought to be entertaining. The next, the regular meeting that I would have chaired of the Energy Committee, Energy and Environment Committee for CML on Friday got canceled because there weren't very many bills that the committee would be working on. The one that CML is supporting is the Solar Gardens one, and the two that Mr. Wilson, the attorney for the CML, said that they would be either watching or moving forward or supporting would be HB 1001 Renewable Energy Standards and SB 100 allowing multiple counties to participate in the climate smart loans. Let's see. The Energy Buzz or the Coffee Buzz was pretty well attended, and I think that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. I don't have anything to report. Maybe I could ask the attorney, where are we at with, not we, where's the global we at with the court case regarding medical marijuana? Are you up to date with that yet?
It's still ongoing. and most cities are smack dab in the middle of their 6-month moratoriums, waiting for the state legislature to act. A number of my clients have submitted changes to the latest medical marijuana bills, which is before the legislature right now, to allow cities to prohibit medical marijuana. They're now calling them medical marijuana centers, which is unfortunately an undefined term in the statute that they're proposing, so hopefully we'll get that worked out. But the latest draft is to basically accept that bill, or the latest idea is to accept that bill, assuming that it allows municipalities that would like to prohibit them altogether. So that's where we are in the legislation. The court case is sort of sitting in limbo at the moment.
And is there a timeline for that, or not?
The court case or the bill?
Court case, sorry.
No, not particularly. At last I heard, City Centennial was still deciding whether or not to pursue an interlocutory appeal. I believe that decision.
That's one of them fancy lawyer words.
Exactly. One of the fancy lawyer words that means an appeal in the middle of the case.
Okay.
Instead of waiting until the entire case is finished to appeal, they may have a right to an interlocutory appeal. Basically, it's called an interim appeal, based on the court ruling that came out. But they are still researching that. Last time I talked to the lawyer for Centennial. There is a time limit on that, and that should be coming up within the next couple of weeks. So I believe they'll at least decide whether or not to appeal now or to let the case play itself out. Last I heard, they might let the case play itself out based on what the legislature is doing. Everybody's trying to wait for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, thanks. And then the only thing is that I'll be in D.C. starting tomorrow for a couple of days, groveling for money for the U.S. 36. I'm sure there's a better term for that, but that seems like what it is.
Yeah. Lobbying, requesting.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think groveling.
You can shovel walks.
Exactly. I think it's supposed to snow there again.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
again?
Right. Bring your expertise.
Trustee D'Souza. Oh, did you?
I forgot one not so small thing I forgot. The library committee with Louisville meets on this coming Wednesday, and they circulate the language that we have for our resolution or ballot language. But they're going to want to know whether or not we want some assistance from them or from members of them in some form or other for educating people in the city, in the town of Superior about libraries. Do you want me to poll you guys individually? Do you want me to?
Yeah, why don't we do that as
head nods?
Yeah, why don't we just do this as an individual?
Will do. Okay.
Trustee D'Souza.
There is the Dr. Cog retreat coming up this weekend, and I won't be able to attend, but I didn't know if Trustee Cirilli.
Conflict too.
Okay. One of the things that they really are looking for is, at least from Boulder County and this end of the Dr. Cog region, is to have more of a focus on sustainability and where that plays in it. So I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to go to a Dr. Cog board retreat or not, but I can certainly use someone, and I don't know, I guess I can pass on how the board feels about that if you think that's something that I assume, since it's in one of our town goals, that the board is interested in seeing that on a regional level as well.
Thanks.
So I can pass that on. I'll pass on a letter or something like that. So that's it.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Gagos.
Nothing to report as far as the town is concerned, but let's just say I'm happy to be back in the United States. I've witnessed things that are hard to describe.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can tell you is that what you see on TV is not nearly close to captivating or capturing, I should say, what's really on the ground. It's a humanitarian crisis of proportions that I don't think we've ever seen in the Western Hemisphere, honestly. So, very grateful for what we do have here.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for doing that. Trustee Williams?
I have nothing to report, but I do have a question on the medical marijuana center. Let's see, I changed the center there. I'm curious, will there be any regulations on the growers and where medical marijuana centers get their supply?
The bill is in a constant state of flux, so I imagine the answer is yes to your question. There were originally some regulations requiring that grows only occur in agricultural industrial zones. There are also some requirements that the marijuana be grown in Colorado so that it doesn't cross state lines, but again, this is it seems like it changes daily. So we're all hopeful that it will address growers.
And is there any way they'll put medical marijuana centers with the responsibility of who they get it from and their compliance with the law?
With their dealer?
With their dealer?
Well, there's also a move to make sure, to basically have it grown on site in some cases so that then it's truly regulated and the numbers of plants are regulated. But again, I wish I could give you a better idea, but it changes all the time. And there's more than one bill out there. That's the latest bill. So I will keep you posted with any developments. And as soon as anything, right now, there's nothing even final enough to send to you. But as soon as there is something, I will let you know.
Great. Thanks. And it was intriguing to see that the DEA did it in enforcement. So,
Yes.
but
Yeah. After Holder came out and said there would be no DEA enforcement, the DEA came in and enforced. So.
Okay. That brings us to item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. Anybody?
Steve Smith, 653 Eaton Circle. Tonight we were talking a little bit about the election and how that's going to be run. If you could give some clarification on the state statute and the 3 discussion points of how the elections can be run in town, that is greater detail than in the agenda. If you'll please be certain to clarify that and why that's being done. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. When we get to that. Okay. Just no public comment.
George Kuffner, 7520 West Coal Creek. I was reading my packet and a little bit hesitant here. If guarding storage, if the economy keeps its downfall as we're in now, they said they were going to give us money, X amount of tax money or X amount of money that they pull off of that site for X amount of years. Now, if they don't start their building when they're supposed to and go according to plan, are they going to extend that period of paying us? You know what I'm saying? Instead of like in 3 years, I don't remember, it's 3 or 5 years. But if the economy is way down and they don't build to what they told you that they were going to build, can we legally or will we extend the period that they have to pay us to get that? I don't remember if it was $1 million or $3 million, whatever the dollars was. But to get that kind of money, we're going to have to extend the time period to allow them to get it built up and then also get it full. So the short-term money, or are we just going to lose that? That's lame, I'm just asking.
Yep. Good question, Mr. Randall.
The agreement states that the 10-year calendar on which the town will be receiving 3% of gross receipts begins upon the initial certificate of occupancy. So the calendar doesn't start until it's built and they start operations.
Okay, I understand that. But now are we talking built the first certificate when they first put their first little building up? Or is that when they put their last building up
There's two.
and they take occupancy and start paying us the 3%?
When their first building is certified for occupancy. They are proposing 3 buildings to be built in 2 phases. And that was part of the original agreement that was included in the preliminary development plans a year and a half ago.
And Mr. Randall, I thought I recollected that they proposed a one-time payment. Is that still true? Or?
I believe, and I'm going back at that year and a half, I believe there was an option that there could be a one-time payment in lieu of the 10-year 3%, yes.
Mm-hmm. And how would, that's at their discretion, is that right?
If I remember, but I'd have to go back and look at the preliminary development plan approvals.
Okay. Well, when research is being...
But the initial question was, if they don't build for 3 years, does our 10 years become 7? No. The calendar does not start ticking until it becomes open and operating.
Okay.
But if they open one building, just one building, and say it takes 8 years before the second building gets put up, does our 10 years up 2 years later?
That's a good question.
Yes.
I mean, it's what I'm saying is
yes,
our 10 years will be up, and we're not going to get what we was promised to get. So I'm just...
Yeah, no, you're right. No, you
I think we need, before we give them their final, maybe we should say, hey, the economy's down, and it may take you 5 or 6 years before your first building gets full. because I know a guy in Boulder that owns some rental or some things. He's losing 12 a week, and the other day he got 4 in a week's time. Got 4 new ones. He thought that was pretty good. He lost 12 and got 4. So is what I'm saying. Even if they build one, there's no guarantee it's going to fill up. No guarantee they're going to stay there. And then, if that be the case, they might not build that other building for 6 years, 5 years, 8 years. And then it's going to take time to fill up, and we're not going to get our money out of them like was proposed. And I just think we need to protect ourselves and write it in there that you're going to pay us that regardless to how many years it takes you to build it and fill it, that you're going to pay us that, and we don't care if it takes 18 or 20 years. When you hit that payment, then your fulfillment is done. Otherwise, we may get only a third of the money, or who knows how much of it. I just think as a town board, we gave them pretty much everything they wanted, but we should somehow, in writing, get what they promised us, and not hoping that it's bad until this, and then all of a sudden it gets better and we don't have to pay you anymore. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Additional public comment? Okay. Seeing none, that brings us to item number 6, presentations, which are none. Item number 7 is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is the approval of the minutes February 8th, 2010 board meeting. Acceptance of the minutes of the January 19th, 2010 and February 3rd, 2010 Planning Commission meetings. Approval of the final development plan for Guardian Storage Solutions. Adoption of a resolution regarding the subdivision improvement agreement for Guardian Storage Solutions. Adoption of a resolution canceling the May 4th, 2010 election for Superior Metropolitan District Number 1. Adoption of a resolution canceling the May 4th, 2010 election for Superior Metropolitan Interchange Metropolitan District. And an adoption of a resolution approving a renewal of the agreement for professional services with Southwest Water Company for water and wastewater plant operations for Superior Metropolitan District Number 1. Motion by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee D'Souza. Discussion.
Comments.
Yeah. Look. So I think we have a motion and a second, and Trustee Kuffner.
I would like pulling the C off of the consent agenda item. There's a lot of discussion about this prior in February of 2009. At that time, it was pulled up off the agenda by a council member stating that the reason it was pulled up and the vote was changed was on account of the income that we was going to receive off of the storage units. I think it ought to go back to a public hearing that night. We had 12 people down here that talked about this subject, and I think they have another opportunity to speak about this. I'm glad that they had 5 buildings to begin with, and now they're down to 3. I know that they moved the setbacks, which I appreciate very much, but I still believe that people that spoke on this before should have an opportunity to come before this board and speak again at a public hearing.
Trustee Skumatz.
So I don't think we can pull anything from the agenda, from the consent agenda at this time, because we already did that. But I did want to ask a question or try to get some clarification about whether the financial agreement that was discussed is part of this or part of sort of a next stage of what happens.
The agreement which contains the additional compensation that the town is to receive, correct me if I'm wrong here, town attorney, was the annexation agreement.
That's correct.
Was not the preliminary development plan. The board's obligated to approve of the final development plan as long as it's in substantial conformance. That's a discretionary consideration on the part of the board. But the economics don't come into play on the FDP.
Thank you.
In other words, it was a done deal.
It was an agreement that the town proposed. You were able to get it. Yeah. You don't have the ability to go back and unilaterally change it.
That's correct.
I guess my comments are, one, technical. We don't pull things off. We pull them off when we approve the agenda, so I agree with Trustee Skumatz. And Otherwise, I hate to get involved in somebody's business plan. You know, if they think the market is not right, I assume that they're not going to start building buildings now. I mean, they're pretty intelligent people. So, once again, I hate for government to get involved in trying to plan businesses. So I think that would be a very slippery slope to enter. So, Trustee Gregos.
I just need to abstain from 7A because I wasn't here.
Okay. Trustee D'Souza? Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a comment about the timing issue. Having been having struggled with consent agenda procedure for 8 years with the Planning Commission, and still now 2 years almost with Ward. I guess, is it in concrete that if a board member at this point did not realize that the time for pulling the matter was at approval of agenda as opposed to voting? I don't like that result when I know the intent of the board member was to pull that item. And all he had to do was say, pull it.
We have
pull it with a vote of the board to be able to overrule it.
Yeah.
It's not a unilateral.
Right. Takes, what, 3/4 of the board to, or 2/3 or something?
2/3.
Trustee Skrulnats.
And I think my only comment is that when you look at the minutes from the Planning Commission, there was no public comment on Guardian during the Planning Commission public hearing about it. So, yeah.
So,
I'm not talking about the merits of the issue.
Somewhat tangentially to this, to your comments.
The procedure.
Since we have a couple minutes this evening, we changed this. I don't remember when we changed our rules, 5-6 years ago, something like that. Where initially all these things would come back forward to the board as a public hearing. We said, well, that's too hard on the developer, so we wanted to make it easy. So that we wanted to put these things into consent agenda. I personally was not in favor of that at that time because I think that somewhat related to what happened to the Fire Protection District last meeting, things get pulled, and then you actually make things worse than if you just had a public hearing that was published. So that was the pleasure of the board. We could always readdress those rules if we wanted to, or I personally would be in favor of that, but I was in the minority in the past, but we could talk about it again some other night. The attorney was leaning forward towards the mic.
The only concern I have is that the reason we do this at the beginning of the agenda to determine the order of the agenda is because that anyone sitting in the audience would then know what to expect later. That's my only concern, is that if there are people who would have said something had this been pulled initially and left because it wasn't pulled, that would be my only concern. Otherwise, I would agree with Trustee Sorelli that it's really just a matter of form.
And the procedural issue, I agree with your point on the procedural issue, and because of that procedural issue of why it's on the consent agenda, I did not seek to have it pulled. I mean, that's our process. But I'm just saying it's pretty easy for a new board member to not understand that the time to say I want it pulled is when the very first thing we do out of the block after we say attendance is, do we approve the agenda?
Been there, done that.
And Phyllis, our clerk, would tell you that I think I had to ask that question every planning commission meeting because I never mastered that in 8 years of, or however long we had that as a process at the planning commission. So I would like, if we could, to not, and I understand the point made by council, however, what happens is if this does get pulled, to the dismay of Guardian Storage, it will be a public hearing that anybody who was here earlier to speak, well, I'm not sure who would be hurt by that except Guardian. And Guardian would be hurt by this because it would slow them down and cause them to have to make a presentation. I just am troubled by the new member not understanding.
Seriously, I would have pulled it if I'd known.
Okay.
I had that intent.
We will pull it. How about that? And then we will, then we can make a decision whether or not we want to proceed with holding the public hearing or not. So,
Do we have to have a public hearing if we pull it?
Not if
Yes,
it's
if you
overridden.
pull it.
If you pull it, it has to be a public hearing.
2/3 of the board
Unless
can
it's-
override the.
If 5 of you say
Right.
that you don't want to pull it, and you're prepared
Right.
to approve it on the consent agenda, it stays on the consent.
So, we have never done this before. So it's pulled, and so I take a vote. I'm looking at the attorney for advice.
I'm
Now-
pulling it up right now.
Okay.
I think we're just using different terms. Let me find it.
Just pull it for discussion.
I mean, we can discuss.
I think we're talking about
anything right
pulling
now.
it and calling it up. And so I think pulling it from the consent agenda is one thing, but the vote is whether or not to call it up. If it's not called up, then it stays on consent and it's approved.
Okay,
Makes
so
sense.
only sort of.
Okay.
That's right.
This is worse than the Senate.
Yes. Okay, so the request has come from one member of the board to call it up. The board members present may override the request for call-up by a vote of 2/3 of the trustees present. So the request for call-up has been made. We now need to know whether the remainder of the board would like to override that request, and that will take a vote.
Pull up and call up. Pull it from the agenda and call up. Is that two different things, or just we're using two different semantics here?
Calling up means you want to review it yourself, meaning that you don't want to leave it to the planning commission. The planning commission's already looked at it. Calling it up means the board of trustees wants to act on it, meaning it will have to be set for a public hearing.
Okay.
The request from trustee Kuffner has been to call it up. Let's just get the words pull it off out of our vocabulary for the moment, to make it easier. The request is to call it up. And that request has been made. That will happen unless there's a motion to override that request.
So, I want to be clear about our process.
Right.
Since we don't do, when things get pulled from the consent agenda to be discussed after the consent agenda, we never have a vote about that except at the beginning of the approval of the agenda with that change.
Right.
Do we now need to do this for everything
No.
that gets moved
Only
unless?
Chapter 16.
Only on these call-up issues. Chapter 16, final development plans. And you don't actually have to do anything. And basically, it's up to a board member, a trustee, to jump up and say, I hereby move to override that request for a call-up if one of the trustees does not want it to be called up. Then there would be a vote. If that doesn't happen, there's no vote.
And it just gets called up.
It just gets called up and set over.
Scheduled.
So,
Which is what happened the last time with the fire. It got scheduled, it got called up. There was no motion to override that call-up, and it got scheduled.
so call up has to do basically with the actual issue you're taking off the consent agenda, correct?
Call-up is only in the case of Chapter 16 zoning issues,
Okay.
and particularly final development plans.
We're saying we want to hear it even though the planning commission heard it.
Exactly.
We're calling it up to hear it.
We should probably discuss this issue some other time, for this particular reason that I think this just becomes very convoluted when we put these things on the consent agenda, but
We've recommended, just so you know, in the new land development code, that we get rid of call-up altogether, because this is what always happens.
What we've been trying to, one of the many things we've been trying to fix with the rewrite of Chapter
Exactly.
16.
well, this would be one of them where it would not be here.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be under the consent agenda then.
Right. You'd be having a public hearing.
Like we did in the past before we changed our rules.
Right.
So, which
You'd
seemed
already
like
be
seemed
done,
like it worked.
probably.
Right. Seemed like it worked pretty well at the time.
Okay.
You'd be done with your public hearing and,
Exactly.
and voting on the actual application already.
Thank you for putting that in there.
Okay.
All right. So there's been a request to call up item number C, the final development plan for Guardian Storage Solutions. Is there anybody who would like to override that?
Right.
Motion by Mayor Muckle to oppose the call-up. Is there a second?
Sure.
Trustee D'Souza, discussion.
One of the reasons that I see this different is from the fire station. I don't think that the public had a lot of time to input, to come down to the board and have input regarding the fire station plans. But I kind of feel like we've been through this quite a bit already with Guardian Storage and public comment, and also that there was just the public hearing for this with the Planning Commission, and so I see this as somewhat different. Not that I don't want to have a chance for the public to have input on this, but I think that these are two, in my mind, these are two separate issues with the fire station and the way this is proceeded.
I agree
Councilor
with Trustee, I agree with Trustee D'Souza.
Trustees' comments?
And the fact that no one was bothered enough by it or interested enough in it to show up at the public hearing at the planning commission says to me it's not that, it's been discussed.
So now what happens?
So now we're going
No,
to take,
the-
so we have a motion and a second, and, right, so.
And the motion again is to override the
To
call-up.
override the
If you're
request
voting
for the
in favor
call-up.
of that, there won't be a call-up.
Okay.
And because of the two-thirds requirement, two-thirds of 7 is 4.66. You need 5 affirmative votes.
That's that high math. We got fancy lawyer words and high math going on tonight. So,
It's not 60-40.
Okay.
okay, all in favor of the motion,
Of the motion to
override the call-up. Williams, Gregoris, D'Souza, Muckle, Schoonmass, opposed, is Cirilli and Kupfer. I believe that that passes.
That passes, meaning that it's
part
not
of the
being
consent
called up.
Right.
Remains on the consent agenda.
Okay, thanks. So I believe we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. It's a long time ago, but
Yes.
it's still true.
Good memories.
So,
You do.
let's see, and are we spending money? Yes, we are. So,
Yes.
Phyllis.
D'Souza?
Yes.
Cirilli?
Yes.
Williams?
Okay, yes.
Skumat?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Hefner?
Yeah.
Gregoris?
Yes, except for 7A.
Okay.
Okay, that carries. Thank you very much. With that brings us to item number 8, which is the adoption of a resolution approving a mail ballot election plan. Mr. Randall.
As we indicated both in the staff report and when we first found this, staff just learned last week that there's a new state law that requires the use of mail ballots, even in municipal elections, for anybody that has signed up with their respective county to receive a mail ballot. Don't hold me to the exact date, but the legislation was enacted last year, became effective after last November's election cycle. So because we're one of the first elections to be held after its effective date, that's why it was new to all of us. The town clerk, upon 1, learning of it, 2, checking with Boulder County to find out how many of our registered voters have already signed up to receive mail ballots, we have currently approximately 8,200, a little over 8,200 registered voters. I find that number to be amazing, recognizing our population. We obviously don't have any children in town under the age of 18. Of the 8,200 registered, more than 3,500 have already signed up to receive the mail ballot. That was the quandary we found ourselves in last Tuesday and Wednesday. The 3 alternatives that staff had identified: conduct what I called the bifurcated election, send the 3,500 ballots out, and conduct a traditional polling place for those that don't receive mail ballots, and go to the cost of both. Go to an exclusively mail ballot with even somewhat higher cost, but at least everybody knows that there's one way in which to cast a vote. Or ignore the state mandate and just go with the town's traditional process of doing a polling place. All have some merit, all have some lack of merit, all have differing costs associated with it, but because of the desired outcome, ease, simplicity for all, staff was recommending that we go ahead for this municipal election and, candidly, all future elections. We go with an all-mail ballot.
What are the consequences of not doing any mail-in ballots?
Yeah, I mean, the state statute requires us to honor what's called the permanent mail-in voter list, but at least some of the lawyers are taking the position this is what's called an unfunded state mandate, meaning that the state handed this down to you but failed to fund it. So they're requiring you as a municipality, and this is particularly true with small municipalities with not a large budget. This is a huge budget implication to them to suddenly turn what was a relatively cheap polling place election into an extremely expensive election. And so I haven't heard of any final decisions to take this position, but there's a legal position that this is an unfunded state mandate, and therefore we can ignore it under Tabor. Because if the state felt like it was so important, the state should have given us money to do it. But the problem with that is that I think most people in Boulder County who signed up to be a permanent mail-in voter are expecting always to receive all of their ballots in the mail because that's what they were told when they signed up. So I'm worried that this is not a legal issue, but more of a policy issue. If you just say, no, it's a polling place election, I believe your voter turnout will perhaps even be lower than usual because people will be expecting to receive a ballot in the mail.
What about the combination?
The combination is what you basically would do. You've already called your poll. Well, we planned on having a polling place election, but the law requires us to mail those ballots to these 3,500 permanent mail-in voters. So that's an option too. There's still a bit of confusion with that because sometimes if people hear I'll go the other way. If people hear there's a polling place election, maybe they're worried that they are not going to get their ballot. But the problem with if you have a polling place or a bifurcated election, as we'll call it, we have to print 3 ballots. The mail ballot that we mail to people, the polling place ballot that is here when you show up to vote, and now there's a third we have to print called a provisional ballot because sometimes people forget. Oh yeah, I got my ballot in the mail. I don't remember if I voted it or not. I don't remember if I put a stamp on it. I don't know if my husband put it in the mail for me or whatever the...
So can they come down then and vote?
They come down and they fill out what's called a provisional ballot, and then we have to go through and see if they voted their mail ballot, and if they voted their mail ballot, we throw out their provisional ballot. So it just creates a little bit more confusion, but that's certainly an option.
Trustee Skromats.
So it looked to me like the staff was recommending a full mail ballot.
Yes.
Which I think is a good solution in terms of, I think that's going to maximize our voting turnout.
Yeah.
And even though it's more expensive, I'll bet you the cost per vote is significantly lower.
There's
Do we know
something
what
to
the
be said
difference
about people coming down and voting, though. I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, this got tradition, and I like that.
I totally agree with you on that one.
I think
that.
a lot
like
of
coming
people
here and
agree with
voting.
that, but unfortunately the permanent mail-in voter list exists.
There's something very nice about
Coming down.
Getting
community
sticker.
coming down and participating in the process.
Waiting in
But
line, waiting for fellas.
It seems like,
And the picketers out in the corner.
right? So, I mean, I don't see any other good way around this. I mean, it seems like that. So we would be on firm legal ground if we had a only mail-in
Yes.
ballot.
Yes. We would be fine if we had a mail ballot election.
Or a bifurcated.
Or the bifurcated
I'm in
election.
favor of the
Either way.
middle ground, I guess, middle approach. They have a choice.
I'm just wondering what the difference in cost is.
It's less expensive, too.
Well, 7,800 or
Oh, sorry, I'm looking up the,
11,750.
I'm reading off the rewrite.
It's less than the middle ground. You say 4,000.
And those are estimates. We've based that on the length of the ballot, the weight of the envelope to be mailed, the size of the envelope to be returned, for both the mail ballot and the bifurcated, using numbers of roughly 7,000. We expect the 8,200 to come down slightly between now and the April election. Between 7,000 ballots or 3,500. You've also got the redundant costs of having election judges, polling places, and the issue of the confusion that's placed that day. Did I or didn't I? Might I be able to sneak through the system and get 2 votes counted? All of that issue that is going to get placed upon those people that you hire to be election judges that day. They're the ones that are going to be having to make that decision. That's why we wrestled with it and came up with the more expensive, but it was the cleaner issue of all mail.
Does it appear that, say that elections move to November, just as a hypothetical statement. So does that mean all November elections appear that they're going to be mail-in ballots now? Is that what this means?
I think that'll depend on what the county sees when the county does its numbers and makes a determination whether or not to conduct a mail ballot election itself. Because if the county comes to the same conclusion that, hey, we're mailing out to 40% of the voters anyway, why don't we just have a mail ballot election? I mean, that may be the case. I think it will depend on the numbers for the county. But what I've heard is the permanent mail-in voter list is much higher than anyone ever expected. So.
Okay. Trustee Skromats?
So, can you do a full mail ballot, but have a place to deposit them down here?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we would kind of have a community
Yes, and they could be
gathering
walked in until 7 p.m. on Election Day.
Okay.
Cool. And I will tell you, there's a bill pending in the legislature right now to change this already. So, because everybody was hit so hard financially with this decision to make not only municipalities, but school districts and special districts have to honor this permanent mail-in voter requirement. So, this may change in June again.
Can we pass an ordinance to tell the state legislature to only meet every other year?
Yeah.
Because they got too much time on their hands.
I would be fully supportive of that.
All right, well, we should, yes, I'm sorry, Trustee Souza.
Just as far as getting out the information to everybody, to know to look for their mail-in ballot. When's the next, we have the one more issue? Two more.
Some of the flexibility that we have as a result of going electronic, we do have two new issues. The deadline tomorrow for the March issue, and then we'll have the April issue that'll be, and again, they're always distributed the last couple days of the month, so
Okay. And
we'll have two bites of this apple.
And maybe something up on the sign out front.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a good idea.
Okay. And I was just curious, where do the extra funds come from? What fund do the extra funds come from for this?
For the increased cost? The town had actually budgeted $7,000 for municipal elections in 2010 because when we were putting the budget together, we still thought we were going to conduct 2 elections in 2010. So you've got $7,000 set aside for municipals. The 4,500 extra, 4,750, whatever it ultimately turns out to, is going to have to come out of the contingency as an unanticipated expenditure.
Okay.
Okay. Any public comment about this particular issue?
So my only concern is that if we decide, or if you decide to go purely with the mail-in ballot, it takes away the prestige of voting. I believe that there are 18-year-olds that are going to enjoy this opportunity, and I believe there are a lot of citizens that really believe that what this country was founded on was that ability to vote and show that they're down here to vote. There are people in other countries that died for this opportunity.
I agree with that.
So I think that it's a difficult decision. I think that your discussion is fair, and I appreciate you giving the thought that you've given it.
Great, thanks.
And again, just to be clear, this doesn't set us up for future ones, only for this particular election
That's
we're
correct.
talking about right now.
And who knows what the legislature's going to do then.
All right.
Well,
okay. Any other public comment about this? I mean, the only other, so it's not really so much relevant to our town, but it also, I mean, it takes away from, I mean, the people that have had this in the past, it takes away your opportunity to talk to people and campaign for office because you got to mail. You have to do that, before the mail ballot comes out, essentially. So.
Yes.
Trustee Gregorus.
I was going to make a motion.
Oh, okay.
I was going to make a comment.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
The fact that if in the future we did mail-in ballots, it kind of defeats the purpose of changing elections to November.
Yeah.
Because
I think
you're getting more out of it because of the mail-in ballot. I mean, that was just my thoughts on it. I was thinking, wait a minute, what's the point of changing to November if we're doing mail-in ballots?
And this is just for this election, and again,
I know.
let's see what the legislature
I know, but I'm
does
thinking in
with-
the future.
Maybe the legislature gives us a break from the permanent mail-in voter list, and then therefore maybe we can still have, we'll see what happens in November.
Okay. Trustee, I'm talking dueling motions. Trustee Skumatz, I think, had the hand up first.
Sorry. And I,
Well, I want to make a motion.
yeah, that's, okay.
We'll see what this motion is.
It's the motion that's here in the document. I'd like to move Town of Superior Resolution Number R10, Series 2010. A resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior declaring the town's intent to conduct the April 6, 2010 regular town election as a mail ballot election and ratifying the town clerk's submittal of a mail ballot plan to the Secretary of State.
Motion by Trustee Skumatz. Is there a second? Second by Trustee D'Souza. Further discussion?
I'm not in favor of this. So.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Skumatz. Reluctantly, D'Souza have motion. Opposed is Governor Sorelli, Muckle, Gregorus, and Williams. I'll entertain another motion.
Yeah, I make.
No, it's yours. You go for it.
Well, I make a motion that we proceed with a combined polling place and mail ballots. Saves us money and allows us the opportunity for people to come down here and vote.
Motion by Trustee Gregorus, second by Trustee Williams. Further discussion? Trustee Skumatz.
I was assuming that if you had the all-mail ballot, you could come down here and bring it and turn it in, and you'd have that opportunity for that community stuff and so on.
Definitely. Okay. Any further discussion?
But you wouldn't be voting, right?
You'd be
You'd be
mailing,
turning
be
it
mailing
out.
a letter.
You'd be turning
Yeah,
it
mailing
out.
a letter, exactly,
So
yeah.
you either fill it out here or you fill it out at home, but you bring it here.
Yeah. Okay. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Williams, Gregoris, Smuckle, Sorelli, Kuffner. Opposed is Gumatz and D'Souza. That motion carries. Thank you. Anything else to come before the board tonight?
No, sir.
Anything else from the board? Seeing none. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
All right.